I feel behind. I don't know what I'm doing with my life, and I don't even know how to begin to fix it. I am desperate not to live a life I hate and so frustrated at feeling like nothing I'm doing is working out. And I've always looked for answers in the stories I love, like Vegeta or Kaiba, who have such similar stories, who embody that sense of permanently being behind. They share that same maddening feeling of watching someone else get exactly what you want. You know, it used to make me feel sick to my stomach when I'd hear about someone I went to school or uni with is now working some super fancy job earning 2 or 3 times more than me. Meanwhile, I was at my job that I utterly hated, that made me dread every single Monday. And some nights I would just be lying there wondering, how did this all go so wrong? And it's in those low moments where we often notice the side characters in a story a lot more, because for every main character in a series blessed with the ability to reach the top of their respective worlds, there are dozens who can't. And realistically, that's most of us. Now, anime has an entire cast of characters built specifically around that one feeling. Seto Kaiba, Bakugo, Oikawa, and of course, Vegeta, all of which give really interesting perspectives on this. But firstly, it's important to understand why so many of us feel this way. Because up until recently, this was coined as a midlife crisis. It didn't happen to everyone, but generally it was people in their 40s or 50s that hadn't accomplished as much as they wanted, who had deep regrets in life and tried to find a way to cope with it. But nowadays, we start feeling like that in our early 20s, right? I've had comments from people that are 19 and say, oh, I feel so far behind in life, I don't know what I'm doing, right? And it seems like slightly crazy, but I can kind of remember having similar thoughts at that age as well. And essentially, technology has exploded this for 2 reasons. 100 years ago, you'd maybe know a friend of a brother of a football teammate who maybe owned a fancy business, and that would be it. Nowadays, you scroll past more people in a week than your grandparents met in their entire lifetime. And of course, the algorithm pushes the biggest wins to the top, so they look like they take up more of the world than they actually do. 2, some of those wins are real. Right, I recently turned 27 and I've seen people in their, early 20s, sometimes even younger, do the most incredible things, right? And honestly, it makes me feel kind of uncomfortable. It makes me wonder, why am I not doing stuff like this now, right? Let alone back when I was their age. And because subconsciously, we know that there's so much information out there that we could theoretically learn to do anything, a part of us always wonders why we haven't done the same, why we haven't used that, why we wasted time not doing that, etc. But both of these things, the pressure and the comparison, come from the same root. The idea that we have to achieve something. Not want to, have to. And that need comes from a few different places. So let's look at where it comes from in a few different characters, then talk about where it might come from in you. For Bakugo, it was very much external. From about age 4, everyone told him how amazing he was, how he'd become the greatest there is. And I think this applies to more people than they realize. Maybe it was videos online telling you what you should be accomplishing by now. Maybe it was a parent or teacher, like I had teacher telling me, oh, you'll get such an amazing career with your grades, etc. You were told you'd be great, and now you don't know how to close the gap between what you were told and where you actually are. And Bakugo's an important one because, for a while at least, he has no idea what he's comparing himself to. He doesn't know that Deku has an anomaly of a power that took 9 generations to cultivate. I'll talk more about this later, but sometimes we're comparing ourselves to people who have totally different circumstances. Maybe they came from rich backgrounds, maybe they've got family members who got them a really good job and we're wondering why our job isn't as good as theirs, right? But more on that later. For Seto Kaiba, it was more about having something to prove. An orphan who survived on intelligence alone, him and his brother were very much looked down on by others, and this left him with a bottomless need to prove himself superior as an adult. He needs more money, more glory, more wins. Being second best is unbearable to us. Again, happens to a lot of us. Maybe we had a rough upbringing. Maybe we were just incredibly miserable when we were younger, and our first few accomplishments are what turned that around for us. We only started to feel better about ourselves when we achieved something because there wasn't much else for us. It took me quite a long time to realize that this was me. I used to really hate how awkward I was, how I acted, how I looked, etc. Then when I started going to the gym, started this channel, that started to change for me. I started to feel proud of myself, but when something changes your life like that and changes how you see yourself, you inevitably start comparing yourself to the next level as well. Because, well, if getting better at the gym or whatever it may be solved your problems before, then we tend to assume that the rest of our problems are because we haven't gone further with that, right? But we'll come back to that. Then there's Oikawa. No otherworldly talent, no tragic backstory forcing greatness on him, probably the most normal circumstances of anyone I've mentioned, but he worked harder than anyone else in his team, and yet spent years watching a first year do it more naturally. He's the embodiment of that feeling that you're just not built to succeed, right? You're not talented enough, and so nothing you do will ever be enough because you just weren't blessed with that. It's horrid, right? I felt that with the gym, with YouTube, with everything. That sad realization that there are people who put in less effort than you, but get more out of it. That talent does exist. Then, of course, there's Vegeta, who, despite such otherworldly circumstances, is perhaps the most relatable of them all. Being the Saiyan Prince, he was gifted with immense talent, told he would go on to achieve such greatness, and for a while he did. There was no one that could touch him. The story drilled into him when he was younger, but how incredible he'd become seemed to be true. It reached a point where he believed himself entitled to greatness, that he simply had to become the strongest. And his later midlife crisis comes when he gets a bit older, settles down with his family, puts that ambition aside, and yet in spite of being genuinely quite happy and thinking to himself that the earth is a nice place to live, he hates himself for it. He hates that his quest for greatness has given way to a life of mediocrity, declaring that he needed Babidi to reawaken the evil within him and return him to the way he was before, a cold and ruthless warrior instead of a content family man. That ambition keeps eating away at him. Again, something I think that a lot of us can relate to. We start feeling good about ourselves again, but that little part of our brain just keeps saying, oh, but what about that? Oh, but you just haven't accomplished enough yet, right? It stops us from being happy. And you've felt this before, right? You're having a good time somewhere, you're enjoying yourself, and then you get hit with that horrid feeling of, I should be doing something productive right now. I used to get that all the time, even if I was just spending a couple hours doing something I genuinely enjoyed instead. Part of me was thinking, man, you didn't do enough today to earn this, and the guilt starts creeping in. So what do we do about it? So the first and most important thing is to just be honest about the jealousy you feel with other people's accomplishments. It's not something I wanted to admit. I found it very, very difficult to admit to myself that was the case, but it is both incredibly freeing and incredibly necessary. For every character I've mentioned, their breakthroughs in terms of both how far they can go and feeling much healthier about the situation started with this. Because otherwise what often happens is because we're fighting against that jealousy, we don't allow ourselves to accept that the people ahead of us are doing things that we're not. Instead, we just try to brute force our way through with sheer effort. Bakugo is a prime example, right? He believed he should be the best on account of his talent and hard work. He's so angry at the fact that he's not where he thinks he should be, but after nearly losing to Deku, finally becomes willing to actually learn from those around him. And from there grows explosively, though pun intended. If you're looking at those ahead of you with anger, they will likely stay ahead of you. If you figure out what they're doing that you're not, that's how you start to catch up. But what about the actual feeling of dissatisfaction? Of I should be doing more, I should be more. This is the core of what drives Vegeta to madness. And if you're not doing anything at all, you're just wasting your days doing nothing, it's probably something that you should listen to. Honestly, it's not going to go away. It's only going to get worse as time goes on. You will regret the time wasted more and more. Especially if there's something you've always wanted to do or to try and you've just never gotten around to it. That will haunt you forever if you don't do it. And the only solution is to do it, be willing to be terrible at it, and improve as you go. What if you're someone who's the opposite? You're actually already doing a lot, you're achieving quite a bit, but it just never feels like enough. Like Vegeta, who's still training, still exceptionally strong, at this point in the series doesn't really know anyone besides Goku who could beat him. He's achieved the Super Saiyan transformation he always wanted, but because he hasn't accomplished that one thing he thinks he needs to do, i.e. surpassing Goku, he assumes the issue is he's not doing enough. He's not ruthless enough. He's been held back by spending time with his new family or being soft. And I'll come back to that in a second, but I think we've all experienced reaching a level that we would have dreamt about before we started, but still feeling disappointed, right? I know that if you've been to the gym for more than a year or so, you've experienced this. I told myself when I started that if I looked like I do now, I'd be ecstatic. I'd be happy. That would be all I wanted. But for a long time, I looked at myself and just thought, I should be even further ahead. You know, I hated how I looked even more than I did when I first started, right? We keep moving the bar higher and higher, which isn't always a bad thing. It can absolutely be done in a healthy way, and I've got a good grip on that now. But the only reason some of you feel behind is because you keep comparing yourself to a higher and higher standard. You're actually not behind at all. You're doing great, you're doing fine, you're just not accepting that. When you look at Vegeta, it should be clear that literally his only issue is that he can't stop comparing himself to one person. The thing that doesn't let him sit in peace with his life, that keeps eating away at him, is that he never beat Goku. His life could be completely identical, training just as much, doing the exact same things every day, but if you could somehow remove that need from him, he would feel 1,000 times better. But of course, it's not as easy as clicking your fingers and having that desire disappear, right? The solution is not to try and stop caring about achieving a certain thing or making something of yourself, because one, you are just not going to be able to do that, and two, it is a totally normal, healthy thing. It's just the way that you look at it. There's two angles you could be coming from. One is just you have genuinely spent years doing stuff that's easy instead of stuff that you actually wanted to do. I have a separate video on this, but for example, scrolling on your phone every day instead of learning an instrument, starting a sport, whatever it is you would have genuinely enjoyed doing more, but it's a bit harder. There's initial resistance. And so you never ended up starting to do it. And again, the bottom line is that regret isn't going to go away until you start doing that thing. But then there's the other angle, the one more relevant for Vegeta, where you've actually done quite a lot and it just hasn't worked out. You're scrambling to understand why. Usually we end up blaming it on, oh, I didn't sacrifice enough, I didn't work hard enough. And this is what drives us insane, because there will always be something more you could have sacrificed, right? More time with your family, your health, your sleep, right? And because of so much of what we pursue nowadays could theoretically be done infinitely, right? Like YouTube, you could script videos all day, every day. It makes us feel like any time spent not doing that is time wasted, right? And I've done this. I've skipped the gym, I've skipped volleyball, I've skipped sleep to stay up and work on videos overnight, right? And it didn't actually make that much of a difference to how well my channel did. It certainly did not allow me to catch up to the people I wanted to. My problem was not, oh, I'm not sacrificing enough. But one, that's probably not the case, right? I touched on this earlier, but often it's not a case of more hours, just using the hours smarter. And Vegeta even noticed at the end of the series that Goku has a totally different mindset to him. He just genuinely loves improving himself. You know, it angers Vegeta that he can be so much better than him whilst not taking it as seriously. He says that his anger has blinded him to the truth that Kakarot is the best. And this isn't him saying that Goku is going to be better than him forever. It's not Vegeta giving up on ever beating him. Of course, he would eventually do so, which I'll come back to. It's simply Vegeta being willing to accept and admit that he's not the best in this moment right now. And realize that it's not the end of the world, right? It's Vegeta accepting that Goku's mindset works too. That the answer for Vegeta isn't to hate himself more, to sacrifice his family, or become a monster again. He still wants to surpass Goku, he still trains relentlessly. He does everything and anything he can to try and surpass him, but that's because he wants to, rather than that he feels he has to. And this is the crux of Vegeta's issue. It's the crux of this whole problem that we've spoken about. Where did the feeling that he needed to surpass Goku come from? It's a combination of the external factors of his upbringing and of course his natural Saiyan ambition. But it was never actually a need. He just let himself be convinced that there was. And there's one last thing I want to talk about, and there's not really an anime equivalent that I could think of for this, so I'm just going to be yapping to you through this camera. If you remember near the start, I mentioned about my friend who I saw on LinkedIn who was working at some like super fancy company as, you know, like super finance manager, whatever, right? And at the time I was applying for jobs on LinkedIn, you know, the kind of jobs where like the pay is terrible and they make you do those insulting, patronizing, like personality tests and stuff like that. Like, it's horrible, right? And about an hour or two after I saw that, as you know, I saw his like profile pop up in the job he was working at and felt terrible about it. I was going for a walk and I happened to run into him, right? And I pretend not to know. You know, we're talking for a bit and I ask him, oh, what are you doing for work these days, right? And the whole time I felt like, as soon as I saw him, I felt sick to my stomach because I was just thinking like, oh, you know, I hate my job. I hate this whole job applying process. It's going nowhere. Whereas this guy's got it all figured out. He's got a super fancy job and stuff. And we were talking for a bit and, you know, again, I pretended not to know. I asked him like, oh, what are you doing for work these days? And he says, oh, I actually haven't been in work for the last few months. I quit my job because it was making me so miserable that I felt like I was going to end it all. And when he first said that, I thought he was joking. Like, people joke about the jobs, like, oh, this is so terrible. It's, yeah. But as we spoke more, I realized that he wasn't joking. He completely meant it, right? In fact, he mentioned that he'd been in and out of mental hospitals the entire time he was working there. And so it hit me that I'd been comparing myself to someone's job who absolutely hated that job. I was just looking at the salary for my job compared to the salary for his job and thinking, oh, I'm so far behind because my job pays so much less. You know, we look at our salary compared to someone else's and feel behind because ours is lower, not knowing how much they hate it and the health issues it's causing them. We compare our gym progress to someone else's, not knowing that they feel behind in every other aspect of life, right? We compare the worst part of our situations to the best part of someone else's because we don't know the other side of that, right? Maybe all three of us were looking at each other thinking, oh, you know, that guy's got it all figured out. I'm so behind by comparison. You know, when you compare your life to the very highlights, the very best parts of 10 other people's, of course you're going to feel behind, right? And so there is the obvious caveat here of, okay, yeah, don't do nothing, right? Don't just, not, you know, if your situation sucks, don't just do nothing and be like, oh yeah, it's all fine, right? What I'm trying to say is if you are putting in effort and you are trying to make progress, you're probably not giving yourself enough credit for how much it's done for you, how far along you are, etc. Your effort has probably gotten you a lot further than you realize because you're comparing yourself to a standard that doesn't actually exist, right? So you got no reason to hate yourself. But anyway, thank you very much for watching. Obviously, I know I used a lot of face cam footage, right? I'm on my sofa right now. As you probably know, Toei does not like people using Dragon Ball clips, right? So I had to use a lot more than normal. But if people like this more casual style of video, I'll maybe do more. Hit subscribe so this video was worth risking my life against Toei for. And I will see you again soon.